retire if you said anything particularly relevant.
Oh, I'm not sure where that was, but
That was like
I'll just start from here.
5 seconds ago. Yeah, you're
Sure.
good.
So this repository, OpenAI-OpenAPI, contains the OpenAPI.yaml specification for the public-facing OpenAI API. And therefore, it gives us very clear guidance on how every single endpoint for the Assistance API should behave. And the Assistance API is a subset of basically this OpenAPI spec. So, for example, what is like a very common endpoint that you're going to be using with Assistance API? The slash, and we can just look at their overview. This client beta assistance create, which basically creates the box for your assistant. And what endpoint is this hitting? And here's the other cool part, which is that this client is, of course, also open source. It is the OpenAPI or OpenAI SDK that you download in order to more easily interface with their APIs. So you normally initialize it with you can initialize it with this OpenAPI class or OpenAI. Sorry, I'm gonna get tripped up throughout this talk, but the OpenAI class, you initialize it. You would normally not include the base URL. You would add your API key, and from there on, you can access the OpenAI API. So going back to how you find out like which endpoints are being hit. Well, you just basically trace back on the client call. Like for example here, OpenAI client beta assistant create. If you navigate to the create method, you can see the inputs that it requires, the output that will be the Pydantic class that shows the output and the parameters that will be included. And then at the bottom, it shows the actual HTTP request that it's making. Here, it's making a post request to assistance. So using this information, you can then go to the OpenAPI spec, which this is the same YAML spec. The same YAML spec that was loaded here is that this one is transformed into JSON and it's also dereferenced. So whereas here, if I do assistant, wait, let me see how YAML is formatted. Okay, /assistant. Right here. So this is the assistance endpoint. If we look at get, you'll see there's a lot of references throughout this document. Should be. Okay, so here's a reference. And these references are so that you basically don't have to type in the code that belongs to this every single time. And if we look at /components all the way at the bottom of the page, you can see, well, /component at the bottom. Well, the idea is that it shouldn't dictate the structures that are commonly used. So the one I'm using is the reference for the purposes of something I'll get into in a moment. So yeah, we have the dereference JSON. What we would do is we would go to /assistant, go to get, and basically just verify that it's there. And then here's where the magic happens. Like we have all these tools at our disposal to define exactly the types and the types of the inputs and outputs going into an endpoint. So we basically use the magic of GPTs to help us build Assistants API. So what I end up doing is passing in the OpenAI, the OpenAI OpenAPI dereference file into the knowledge of a GPT, feed it a couple of instructions telling it like what the overall development process is, and basically ask it to assist me with building the endpoint. So if we start here, the first thing that it does is it programmatically navigates this file, because this file would probably exceed, well, yeah, it would probably we can probably do the math for this, but it could exceed the token limit of GPT-4. I think that's what Assistants uses. Yeah, so it could exceed GPT-4, the GPT-4 context limit, and consequently it wouldn't be able to run. So what this does is it first programmatically navigates to this relevant portion of the OpenAPI specification and extracts the information that is already dereferenced. If we hadn't dereferenced it, then that means that the code that ChatGPT would need to execute would require the extra step of dereferencing things itself, which could be inconsistent. So I'm basically offloading the work that that GPT needs to do and making it simpler for it to consistently retrieve the relevant information. So here's the information regarding the endpoint, so that it then uses it as reference to build a test, which is the first step in the development process. And from here on, I basically just iterate with GPT to ensure that the test is actually adequate, which in this case, Assistants, this is wrong. It should have a beta in here, which it doesn't understand the format of the SDK, but over time, as you develop with it, then it learns how the SDK works. So assuming that this is correct, we could just tell it from here on, okay, looks good. Let's make the or looks good. Help me make the endpoint. And then here it's going to create the Fast API endpoint, which was already dictated in the instructions to help me create the endpoint. And this is just from here on, it's an iterative process between myself and GPT and making sure that it's passing the original test and that everything is aligned with the OpenAPI specification. And like as a human, my job here is just to verify that everything is able to compile and run and work exactly as it does on OpenAI. So for example, to actually illustrate how this works in practice, I already have the environment running. I have the services, which were in part illustrated in the diagram here. I have Postgres, Redis, and MinIO working. And we are going to run the tests that are going to leverage all but Redis. And so far, just for some background, so far the Assistants API is it already has the Assistants endpoints ready. It's only missing, well, it has the Assistants endpoints ready and the file endpoints ready. The threads endpoints still need to be created, and so do we need, and so and we also need to create the runs endpoints and potentially run steps endpoints, which are all things that are documented in the Assistants API documentation. So if we look at threads, messages, well, okay, messages too. Messages, runs, and threads are the three big pieces remaining to the assistance API, at least in context of GPTs. So if we go back to the code and we look at the tests, well, I'm going to execute first against the official OpenAI API. So there's not going to be a we're not going to be running this locally. There's nothing that's going to be going on here on the logs of the services that I'm running locally. It's just going to be pinging the OpenAI API, just for reference. And we're also going to do this on the other test. So if we run this, everything should pass except for the, whoa, okay, that's a complete lie. Okay, so this was one of the errors that I was actually running into.
Interesting.
It for some reason, the size of the file that I was passing in was 73 bytes, and overnight it decided it's 71 bytes.
I've had that before when I'm like, I remember like sometime working, I think it was just with the straight up assistant API, like the bytes it was expecting like kept like shifting around randomly. It was really weird.
Yeah. So yeah, I explicitly tell it to like be a certain amount of bytes, which I'm not going to do. So I'm just going to say is not none. I'm going to make it more flexible this way.
If you don't pass the test, change the test.
Yeah, exactly.
Software development.
Okay. Well, so the assistance API is still failing, but the file endpoints are working. Why is invalid type for metadata.list expected string? Oh, okay. So this is one of the differences between, and something that I was a little bit on the edge of whether I should do it myself. But the metadata for the assistance API, for the official assistance API, is everything's a list. Everything's a key. Well, no. Whenever you're saving anything as actually. Okay, so the point I'm getting at is OpenAI saves their metadata values as strings. And in our case, we are not saving them as strings in our database. In Postgres, they're being saved as a JSON object, like through and well, okay. In both cases, okay, the JSON object that OpenAI saves, the values of that JSON object are all strings, no matter what the original type was in OpenAI. In the assistance, and I find that to be a bit of a hindrance. So for the assistance API, what I'm doing is I'm just saving it as the JSON without any modification, without parsing it into a string.
That sounds better to me, like, or more flexible at least.
Yeah, just more. It's more intuitive to keep it that way. But I think I can still like salvage this if I.
The list expected string we got array.
We're gonna expected.
I mean,
What?
do you just?
Is this being cut off? Oh, it did.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that's weird. Expected a string, got an array instead. This happens at what level? At what? I'm guessing it's the first test, so probably this.
Metadata. Okay.
This might actually require a lot of changes.
Oh no.
I think I'm going to abstain from actually running this test, and
if the test won't pass, comment out the test.
Yep. Test create assistant. Oh, and they all depend on the. Okay, whatever.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, they all depend on that test,
Right,
so we're gonna count
Uh-huh.
all of this out. And that is actually something I should probably resolve, because I think that when you retrieve the information
Well, the question would be,
back
why
from
are they
OpenAI,
doing it? And it might be, that in order, like, having a consistent data type might be something that makes it easier down the line.
mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm not sure. I guess saving it as a JSON. No, I don't know. I have no idea.
If you save it as, well, I guess that I was thinking like you could just stringify the JSON, right? But you're just stringifying it so the test pass. So there's not really a reason to do that.
Yeah, I'm trying to minimize the amount of changes I'm doing here.
For sure.
Okay, so the reason the last two tests is the same. The reason that the last two tests didn't pass is the same reason that the first test didn't pass. It's returning the values in their original type as opposed to a string. So yeah. That's something I'm gonna need to look into, perhaps, if I care to lobotomize Assistant's API to imitate OpenAI's version. But yeah, that's a small difference. Now, besides the metadata issue here, all of the other tests were passing. Yeah, so all the other tests pass. Now, if we revert back to the actual API that I'm hosting, which is not hitting OpenAI in any shape, in any way, then in this case, all tests should pass. So that is what we're this is just a representation of the this assistance API working in a basically only coding like 10%. The GPT is coding the other 90%. Well, more like the GPT is coding 50%, then Copilot is coding 40%, and I'm coding 10%. So that's basically the workflow that's happening here.
2024 workflow, baby. Absolutely.
Yep. And one of the things that I kind of wanted to talk to you, Yikes, about is how can I like expedite this, because this isn't that efficient. Like the fact that it doesn't know the SDK format is a pain in the butt. That's one of the issues. The other thing is, I oftentimes, just to ensure consistency with my current code, I'm passing it context of my code base and only small chunks of it, just so that it understands the gist of how things are working. So I'm thinking of how I can expedite this this development process.
Yeah, so that is the eternal struggle. So if you want a coding assistant that has context of your code base, or at least one that you can easily manage the context of what files it's looking at, you probably want a program called Aider by Paul Gaultier, which you can either AIDER. It runs in your terminal, so you still have to context switch, unfortunately, but there is also a VS Code extension by Morph Labs called Rift, and that comes with Aider and a few other utilities. I believe it's Mentat and GPT Engineer and a couple others.
What is it called?
It is called Rift by Morph Labs. It can be a little bit janky sometimes, so try it and see if it fits into your workflow. If it does, then that's great, because the thing that it's missing is the native features of all of the assistants that it's including, which is the voice coding feature of Aider, which is a feature that I like because I like to multitask and do things like overly fast and janky and just make the thing work. But
did you hear about the new text to speech?
Which new
on
text
VS
to
Code.
speech on VS Code? Well, so
It runs locally. I can show you.
they have had Copilot voice coding or something like that. Oh, okay. So they just put it in there now.
What
Awesome.
is this?
Cool, cool, great. Well, that might sell me to go back over to Copilot because I've been using I think I've been using Duet. Um, Duet's been pretty
I
good about
think this is
context.
I, this might be something that you can access outside of Copilot.
Yeah, it used to be split off into a different extension called like VS Code voice coding or like Copilot nightly
Yeah.
voice coding or something like that. But they might have integrated it into modern Copilot. I'm overdue to take a look at Copilot anyway. Like I quit using it a long time ago when it was pretty like new and still like basically just gave you garbage code all the time. But I hope they've improved the model by now at least. Um,
Mm-hmm. Right. So you're recommending trying out Rift.
Yeah, if you want
Um,
something that's more that is less, so Copilot is a good like autocomplete on steroids, but if you want kind of a pair programmer sitting on the side that kind of understands your code base a little more, I think your move is Rift.
mm-hmm.
And then if Rift is like too janky or slow because it's sometimes basically the idea behind Rift is that
Is
it's an LSP but for AI basically. Um,
what's an LSP?
Um, it's a language. Am I getting the acronym right? It's a language server. So it would normally like the thing that is.
Uh,
Uh,
is it running locally?
yes, it runs a server locally, and then it calls OpenAI APIs from there. Generally,
Oh, okay. So no, that's what I was asking, like whether or not it's using hosted inference or your own local
language
inference.
server protocol. That's what it is. Yeah, no, I think it defaults to using OpenAI. I believe some of the options in there might allow you to use like set a URL to call from.
Right. So this is kind of like one of the cool things. Like if for example, one of the big things about OpenGPTs is that we could eventually make a client or just expose the GPTs via API.
Yeah,
Um,
that's like the big cool
and
thing, I think.
yeah, and currently, like the GPTs does serve a very important purpose of being able to navigate this humongous file and be able to reference this without me like needing to like search through the JSON copy paste and maybe miss a couple lines and that throws everything off and my
Sure.
life is hell. Um, this is able to retrieve from that knowledge and it's a combination of that knowledge and the instruction.
If you
So if
want,
we were
yeah, if you want or like the utility that I used to use before GPTs were a thing, and I'm actually going to set one up for the event, is a utility. You might have seen it before called Verba. It's from Weaviate. And it's basically like a prepackaged chat client with like a very, very robust RAG pipeline built into it. So if you need something like to dump a bunch of JSON out to Markdown and upload it into that, and then have that retrieve chunks with confidence scores and like parts of the JSON that it's looking at, et cetera, that's your move, I
okay,
think.
yeah, so that's one thing I actually forgot. I omitted code interpreter too.
Hmm.
It's a combination of code interpreter, knowledge, and instruction.
Let's see. Yeah. So, let's see. I think if you wanted to add to that stack, you probably would use so you can use Open Interpreter, and that'll allow you to have a GPT that executes code on your
Mhm.
local runtime. You could use that kind of in. I basically use that as like like an on-demand scripting utility. Like I need a Python script that does this,
Mhm.
and I just tell it to do that. Um,
Mhm.
so I use like Verba for like that interfaces with me if because it's managing like my internal knowledge graph for lack of a better term. Um, and then Aider is interfacing with my VS Code, and then Open Interpreter is when I need to if I need to control either the rest of my machine or execute something on my runtime. Um, and I want to just use natural language to do it. So basically, like I'm kind of I'm like this. The meat is at the center of my computer, and then that's how I extend into the computer is through those.
Right.
utilities.
So you use Verba for retrieval, and does Verba use a locally hosted model?
Verba can use locally hosted models, yes.
Mm-hmm. So
But a
I
lot of
basically
these,
need Open Interpreter
Mhm.
to access. Okay. So Open Interpreter, I'm pretty sure can access a file. You just need to
Well,
tell
wait,
it.
is this for a tool that you're using or like something that you'd like to implement into like you want to give code interpreter to the GPT, the assistance API that you're using?
So I'm trying to eliminate the startup of passing, like, currently the GPT, not this one. This one does basically everything I need it to do, with the exception of being able to understand how my code base is formatted so that it follows that same format.
Mm-hmm.
That is the one thing that is missing.
Yeah, and like if you could
Like,
staple like Aider to Verba, I think that would probably be ideal because then you can feed all the docs. But I use them all independently, but you can there's a workflow that so like what you can do with Aider is you can
what
be
here?
AIDER. It's just
Oh,
Google for GitHub Aider AIDER. If you need to do yeah, there you
yeah, I
go.
got it.
You got it. Um, yeah, there's a workflow. It would work with Rift or it would also work with Aider, where you can, if you plan your workout ahead of time. So if you are like you're in with the docs and the RAG bot and you're chatting and pulling all the information that you need and getting um, what you need, then you write a comment over in VS Code. You flip over and you're like comment like fucking create a function that calls X or Y or like basically like write short comments that describe the code that you're going to need as soon as you figure out what that is, and then you just have Aider walk through the file with you and actually write the code, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, I'm gonna look into these and
They're
see
all definitely worth a look.
how feasible it is to, like, actually resolve this problem. Um, because if I'm making like a new, I do not want to compete against the guys who are trying to replace programmers. Those guys are like leagues ahead of me, and I have no intent in competing against them.
Well, sure, yeah,
So,
those are all tools that I use to write code. Those are not tools that I like implement into another tool to like sell to a customer or something. Um, they
yeah.
however, the actually one of the sponsors for this actually, Marcin was just going over it. Based AI has a some sort of interface where they go directly. Uh, Basically, you can define an agent in their framework, and then you can fairly easily, like I think a couple of clicks and copy paste, make that agent a tool for an OpenAI GPT. Um, so it might be worth
So
looking into that.
you can, um, their thing is cross compatible with GPTs.
Basically, yeah.
Cool.
Ziggy might have
If
a
it
better
worked the other way
understanding.
around, does it
Right.
work the other way around too?
The other way around, where you could create an agent there and then it could use a GPT as a tool.
Well, I mean, just copying and pasting GPTs, copying and pasting the GPT details into their thing.
Um, Possibly. I'm not entirely sure. I'm at like I plan to play with it a little bit today, so I'll probably.
What's their thing?
It is bazed.ai. Oh, speak of the devil. Marcin's right here. We were just talking about the exactly how the based to GPT kind of relationship works. Do you want to jump on stage and explain it real quick, Marcin? That's something you're interested in.
Hi, welcome to Based AI.
Let's see. There we go. There he is. We got you the engineer right there. I figure you said it.
Sweet.
You gave us the rundown once, but it might be useful for what Sebastian is trying to do, which is the figure out a piece of the assistant's workflow.
I can run you through this based, then you can tell me like how based can help me.
Yeah.
So-
I was just demoing it on the other voice channel.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah.
So
Okay.
this is my use case. I'll tell you. I have this GPT. What it does, and I mean, it does some other things. Like basically, the first step of the instruction is like the meat of it, which is, I'm using it for development, and you're talking in my background here.
Don't watch that video. Just ask me.
Yeah. Okay. So if I go to this one, okay. I'm using this to build in a clone of the OpenAI Assistants API. And the first step of this GPT in helping me build that clone is being able to reference its OpenAPI specification, which I have uploaded in its knowledge. And I don't want it to just like rag this because it's not going to do well. So what I'm doing is I'm using Code Interpreter to have it navigate this open API specification to then only to very precisely get the information I want according to basically my initial prompt, which is for example, it could be that get the post information for the assistance endpoint. Yeah, that's a big thing. And it comprises of the three tools: instruction, context, and code interpreter. So how does
so you're basically you have the spec and you want to generate like handlers for the spec and like learn about it and discuss it, right? But you need to like precisely. Am I getting this right? Or
I have a spec and I need the GPT to be aware of that spec so that it can write code for me.
Yeah, I mean, what I showed previously was that if you make an agent with base, and this agent, those agents are like little state machines, so you can like specify steps for them and program them however you want. So it's not like just system prompt. It's more than that. So you can actually teach one to do all the figuring out and reading the file or files you're interested in. And then you can hook that up as a tool to your GPT. So then you have another intelligent system in the background, which has all the files, which has some instructions, and then you can use the GPT as a kind of conversational interface, because based agents mostly aren't conversational; they are transactional. So you send them like a query, for example. So let's say, tell me everything about the completions endpoint, and the agents do their thing, and they come back to the GPT, and the GPT might write code, for example.
So you're providing a subset of tools that you can pass to multiple agents for them to resolve your prompt?
So Base is a framework for building agents, and you can in TypeScript. So I'm sorry, but if you wanted to use that, you would have to write more code, basically. But it's not a lot. It's not like LangChain where you like have tons of stuff. And you can code your own tools. So we used Base originally for building multi-agent system that takes a source code and builds all the configurations that allow to put whatever app this is in the cloud, which is a complex problem. But we had done agents that, for example, browse the source code, but not with RAG. They just go into the repo. They have all like list files. Go into the file, grep for shit, all those all those things, and this works. This actually works because you have one agent just going over the source code and very precisely fetching whatever piece the system is looking for. And then you have another agent that doesn't do the code browsing, but is, for example, quite good in compiling all this information and writing deployment configs, right? So I think that would be the kind of case you have.
Navigating the source code is it was a thing I forgot to mention, which is the thing that GPTs is missing. So I'm glad you mentioned it.
Yeah, it's the having it like comb through the source code and then add that to the state and then use that state as like a data structure that you can then transform from there to make it useful to you would be one way. But since you mentioned that primarily what you're using code interpreter for is to more or less like make RAG not suck. The other tool that I showed you, Verba, like it gives you a much more powerful and easy to use like RAG interface, so you can define your chunk size, define your overlaps, which embedding model you're using, and then it'll pull when it pulls. When it does the retrieval, it'll also add a confidence score to that retrieval, and then the output that it is giving you will prioritize the chunks in order of the confidence score that they're retrieved. So if it's like 99% semantic match to your query or to the retrieval query, then that will be more important than one that is like 50% confidence score, et cetera, et cetera. So you might be able to solve your problem with mostly Verba and then maybe a Bayes in the middle that's like handling stuff, and then maybe a GPT if you really want to go there.
Do you want to give it a shot? I have the JSON file already in my. I just need to send you the link to the file.
Shoot me the
I can
files.
send you the instructions.
Yeah, shoot me the files, and then because I'm going to be fiddling, I want to get a Verba set up for the information about the event today anyway, to help people kind of navigate the docs and stuff with a pretty solid RAG thingy. So yeah, if you shoot me over one, I'll be working, I'll be doing it anyway, so I might as well.
It should be pretty straightforward. I have the instruction, and here's the file. Well, the link to the file, you can download it as you wish.
Yeah, it's all good.
And then.
Okay.
This is the instructions that I'm going to modify so that it doesn't include code interpreter.
Oh hell, this is a long open API spec.
Yeah, it's the entire. It's OpenAI's Open API specification for their entire API.
Yeah,
and it's also dereferenced.
I can see.
So there's a lot of redundancy.
Right, I can see why you need like the specific retrieval, because if you're just doing a raw RAG, you're gonna pull like 20 chunks that are all the same since it's dereferenced, and it'll clog your context. Yeah.
If you just do it through like keyword matching, then you can see like if I were to do /assistant, I get 91 matches.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So
it might not prioritize the endpoint match.
I'm not exactly sure how they compute confidence, but it might be. So the way that it'll structure is it'll chunk, and then it'll put an overlap on the chunks, and then it'll treat all of the overlapping chunks as one chunk when it's doing a retrieval pass. So it might pull if it hits multiple parts of the function, and then like ends up pulling the function, and there's 3 hits on it for a semantic match, then that'll be a factor in computing the confidence score. So that's kind of how it I think largely with your
so here it's actually a lot of the so there's like a problem. Most of the assistance stuff is coming from like the /threads thread ID /message path. So we're gonna see. We're gonna see how effective it
Yeah,
is.
I guess it'll be an interesting test because I haven't tried to throw a lot of homogeneous data with like subtle differences at it before, so we'll kind of see how it do. But usually, like the RAG that comes by default in just OpenAI GPTs is absolute dog shit. I don't know what they're doing or if they're just dumping it into the context or something, but it's terrible in my experience. So the probably what I suspect is the miss in your pipeline and why you're getting garbage data is the whatever chunking with overlap strategy they're using to do a retrieval on uploaded data with OpenAI is not good, and they need to fix it.
Okay, so I just updated the instructions so that it omits the code interpreter part.
Sweet.
I think I'll try something with this. Like I'll try. I need to do some things, but later tonight I might actually go and experiment with this like long open API spec with
Yeah.
base to see if I can like make an agent that can understand the structure of it. So like when you're asking about concrete path, it actually goes to the right thing always.
Yeah.
But yeah, because
But
you probably had to nail that down for cloud, right?
it's gonna have like a pre-indexing step and then just work from the context from memory.
Yeah.
Here's
Yeah,
here's the official API OpenAI APIs. Oh, holy fuck.
OpenAI Open
Open
API.
API spec. If you're interested, this one's the difference is YAML and it's not dereferenced. So there's a lot of references in here. I think that references just make GPT's job easier. But probably no, actually, like yeah. If you're thinking about RAG, then I think if it's referenced, then it's gonna absolutely be awful. Because it's gonna be like either only getting the context or it's only gonna be getting the endpoints at best. Whereas if it's dereferenced, it at least like has a chance of getting the whole thing. I don't know. That's my theory.
You just gave me an idea because I'm like, oh yeah, this is a little thing I can experiment with. But in base, we have this platform, and people are supposed to publish their agents, so other agents can call them. So you do everything yourself. So I can imagine like having a specialized agent that answers like indexes open API specs and is really good at figuring out things about
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Would be a universal tool.
Hmm.
I mean, tools in base are kind of different thing. Like tools are just functions, but we have like those intelligent tools which are agents. So that would be an example of that, I guess. So I might actually give it a try and see what I can come up with. And if it works, then it's just like one URL to add it to that GPT and you're golden. So
Yeah, that would be awesome.
let's see.
We'll see.
That would be huge because my
Alright.
GPT, what I basically gave you here, well, plus code interpreter, is sufficient. Well, it does a really good job at that. Like it is able to like navigate the OpenAPI spec very well. So, in fact, I'm gonna republish my original instructions so that you can just use that, and you don't need to worry about the actual thing working. In fact, I can just share this GPT with you. Wait, if I share the GPT with you, can you edit it? I don't think you can.
I don't think so.
Yeah. All right. Well, here's the original. Here's the original instruction. All you need in order to make this first step work is code interpreter, that file, that original dereference file, and this instruction and this instruction. Yeah, that's what you need, and that works like a charm.
All right. I'll give it a try.
Sweet. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome.
And Yikes, how's your thing working? Your Verba.
Dope. Well, thank you everybody for stopping by and learning how to reverse engineer the fastest growing app ever in the history of humanity. You do that more, do it a bunch in every language possible. It'll be really funny. Next up, we will be having I believe so. It depends on who gets here first. I am going to grab somebody from Commune to give us a run through of how their thing currently works, how it is intended to work, and what kind of improvements or use cases it might be good for. Because they do have a couple of sponsor prizes up for that. But I'm not sure when he will be available. So it might be before, it might be after, but the one that I do currently have locked in is at 6:30, which is about 4 hours and 20 minutes from now, with one of the people from our secret lab, which is, if you're not familiar, we run kind of a little program where if you have code and you have the willingness to go through with it, but you don't have the compute, we will help you run your experiments and get you on our cards. And so we pulled one of the people for whom we are making that happen. He's been fine tuning Moondream. I don't know if the run will be finished by then, because the servers are a bit, they're going up, they're going down, they're going side to side. But if it is, then maybe he can. He was planning on showing off fine-tuned Moondream versus Baklava. But if not, then he'll just kind of be going over his experience of fine-tuning models and what he wishes he knew before he started jumping onto the lab, etc. And yeah, I guess that is a wrap for now. I will go ahead and quit my stream and end this event, and then yeah, next one will be possibly before 6:30, but if it's not before 6:30, then it'll be at 6:30. And then yeah, Seb, I will get you a copy of this. Oh, okay. Whoops, I accidentally ended it. And then it bonked. But yeah, I will. Let me message Seb. We'll get you a copy of the vid. Yeah, yeah. Do you want transcription or just vid? Okay, and then we stop recording and then we stop streaming.